In the courtyard of a royal palace stood 180 women. They were the king's consorts and palace girls, jeweled and silked, summoned here for something none of them had ever heard of: drill. Each was handed a halberd. Before them stood an outsider, a guest the king had invited. He divided the 180 women into 2 companies and named the king's 2 favorite consorts as their captains. He explained the rules. At the drum, advance. At the next drum, turn left. At the next, turn right. When he had finished, he asked, "Is this understood?" The women said it was. The drum sounded. The whole courtyard dissolved into laughter. The outsider did not grow angry. "If the rules are not clear," he said, "and the commands not familiar, the fault belongs to the general." So he went through the rules again, from the beginning, point by point, until they could not be made plainer. Then he struck the drum. The courtyard dissolved into laughter again, and the 2 captains laughed hardest of all, leaning on their halberds, glancing up at the terrace where the king sat. This time the outsider said, "The rules are now clear, and still they are not obeyed. That is the fault of the officers." And he gave the order, "Take the 2 captains out and behead them." On the high terrace, the king started up in alarm and sent word down at once. "Without these 2 women, I cannot taste my food. Do not kill them." The outsider's answer would enter every book on war that came after. "I have received my command as general," he said, "and a general in the field may refuse the command of his king." The 2 most precious heads in the kingdom fell. The courtyard went silent as death. The drum sounded again. Forward, left, right, kneel, rise. 180 women moved as one, in lines a blade might have cut. Not one of them made a sound. To weigh what happened in that courtyard, it helps to open another book. The first great war text of Western civilization is a poem. The Iliad begins with a single word, rage, and calls on the goddess to sing it, the rage of Achilles. In that poem, war is the stage on which heroes become themselves. Glory outweighs death, and a single duel can fill a book. The first great war text of Chinese civilization is a manual. It begins not with a song, but with a warning. War is the great matter of the state, the ground of life and death, the road to survival or ruin. It must be examined. One civilization handed its children war as glory. The other handed it to them labeled like a dangerous substance. The 2 oldest war texts on Earth, and their temperatures run in opposite directions. The man who wrote the manual is the outsider in the courtyard. His name was Sun Wu. The world calls him Sun Tzu. His 13 chapters are The Art of War, today the most printed, most translated book on war ever written. It sits on the reading lists of military academies and on the shelves of airport bookshops. And about the man himself, we know astonishingly little. Researching this series, this was one of the things that startled me most. The most widely read military book on the planet has an author who is nearly transparent in history. The reliable record holds exactly 3 scenes. He presented the book. He drilled the women in that courtyard. He took part in one war. Then he disappears from the page. This episode is those 3 scenes and the 13 chapters. The story is still in the closing years of the spring and autumn age, in the southeast corner of the board. Wu, the weapon we watched being forged last time. And the clock runs back a few years to before the fall of Ying. In those years, strange new things were being written down all over the world. In the state of Lu, a man named Kong Chiu, Confucius, was teaching his students ritual and humaneness. By the Ganges, a prince who had walked away from his palace was teaching the end of suffering. On the Aegean, a man named Pythagoras was measuring triangles. And in the palace of Wu, a refugee from the northern state of Qi handed the king 13 scrolls. The man who brought him to court was someone we know. Wu Zixu, the man sharpening Wu into the blade of his own revenge, had found the king, the one man who understood blades better than anyone alive. King Helu read the 13 chapters and said, "I have read all of it. May I make a small test with women?" So came the courtyard. After the 2 beheadings, Sun Wu sent word to the king, "The troops are ready. Come down and inspect them. This company will now go through fire and water at your order." The king replied, "Let the general return to his lodgings and rest. I do not wish to come down." Sun Wu answered with one line, "So the king is fond of the words, but cannot use the thing itself." Helu used him all the same, not out of fondness, because he had understood what the courtyard meant. In this man's hands, an army did not run on favor, and did not run on hot blood. It ran on rules, the way a machine runs. That is the temperature of the 13 chapters. So what is actually in the 13 chapters? 25 centuries of quotation have buried the book under its own fame. Set the famous lines aside, then, and open it the way Helu did, expecting plans of battle. The first thing you meet is that opening warning again, and the book means it. Near the far end of the scrolls, the same thought is driven to its limit. A kingdom destroyed cannot be brought back into being, and the dead cannot be returned to life. Therefore, the enlightened ruler is cautious, and the good general is on guard. A book about war, and what it repeats from end to end is, "Do not fight if you can help it, because war is ruinously expensive. March an army of 100,000, and the rear bleeds 1,000 pieces of gold a day. The longer it drags, the emptier the treasury." The book's conclusion is cold. In war, what matters is winning, not how long you fight. Win fast, or your victory will bankrupt you into defeat. Keep reading, and the warnings give way to a stranger idea. The idea this episode is named for. The victorious army wins first, and then seeks battle. The defeated army gives battle first, and then seeks to win. The fighting is decided before it starts, in the council chamber, in the account books, in the reports of spies. Compare the 2 sides: the way, the weather, the ground, the general, the rules. Compare the rulers, the commanders, the discipline, the rewards and punishments. Know the other, and know yourself, and in 100 battles you will never be in danger. A battlefield is not a place to try your luck. It is a counter where you collect a result that has already been computed. Which is why this book contains one of the most anti-heroic sentences ever written, the exact reverse of the Iliad. "The victories of the truly skilled," it says, "bring no fame for cleverness and no glory for courage." A perfectly fought war looks boring because everything breathtaking in it happened before the first drum. The blazing, song-worthy triumph that Homer sang on Sun Wu's ledger, that kind of victory is a failing grade. You have already seen winning first in action. Last episode, those 5 victories in a row that broke Chu, a small army shattering a giant, looked like a miracle. It was bookkeeping. For 6 years before that march, Wu had split its forces into 3 and taken turns raiding the Chu border. One force strikes. The whole Chu army scrambles out to meet it. The raiders melt away. Another force strikes. Chu scrambles again. 6 years of this, and Chu's army was run ragged, while Wu's stayed fresh. The 5 battles of 506 BC began 6 years before they were fought. And then, close to its summit, the book does something no military manual had ever done. It follows its own arithmetic one step further. When winning first is carried to its limit, when planning, alliances, strength, and morale are all in place, and the imbalance is plain before a single arrow flies, then the battle itself becomes unnecessary. The highest war attacks the enemy's plans. The next, his alliances. The next, his army. The lowest of all besieges his cities. To win 100 battles out of 100 is not the best that can be done. To bend the enemy without giving battle, that is the best of the best. This is where the book runs out of road at its own summit, a manual of war that crowns no battle as the supreme victory. Not out of mercy. There is not one word of mercy in it. It teaches attack by fire. It teaches the handling of spies. It teaches that all war is deception, but out of arithmetic. War is too expensive. The best bill is the one that never comes. Which leaves the obvious question. The man who wrote that the highest victory needs no battle marched with an army that burned its way to the capital of Chu. How does that square? The first answer. The summit is a direction, not a vow. No battle is the limit the calculation reaches toward. Approach it if you can. If you cannot, fall back one level. Fight, but win beforehand. Win quickly, win cheap. The second answer is colder, and it is written in what happened after the fall of Ying. That textbook victory became the book's own cautionary tale. The army of Wu took the capital, and then stood in it, mired in the vastness of Chu, in revenge and plunder and quarrels over spoils. A weeping envoy brought the army of Qin down from the west. The state of Yue struck Wu's undefended rear. The king's own brother slipped home and declared himself king. Within the year, the conquerors were retreating the way they had come. 5 battles, 5 victories, the enemy capital taken, and not 1 inch of Chu was held. Wu had won every battle and lost the war. A long campaign drains the state. It was already in his book. Sun Wu watched all of it. The fires of Ying, the sound of the whip on a dead king's back, the long, humiliating road home. What he thought, no record anywhere survives. What the record does show is this. After the Chu campaign, the man vanishes. No reward is listed, no office, no date of death. The records of the grand historian credits Wu's rise, the awe it struck into the northern powers, to Sun Tzu's planning, and then says nothing more, ever. The man who wrote "Waste nothing on an unnecessary war" declined to waste the rest of himself on anything history could see. The 13 chapters he left behind began to travel from state to state. Everyone read them, but the state that read this cold arithmetic most carefully, most literally, line by line, was the one in the West. the one that had never cared for glory, and only ever kept accounts. Wu did not understand its own guest's book. Back from Chu, the weapon had tasted blood, and the point swung south toward the neighboring kingdom of Yue. The two states tore at each other across the rivers and lakes. King Helu died on a battlefield against Yue. His son Fuchai took the throne, drilled his army for 3 years, and smashed Yue to the edge of extinction. The defeated king of Yue, with 5,000 survivors, retreated up a mountain and surrendered, offering himself to Wu as a slave. Everyone understood that the game was over. One man understood otherwise. The beaten king fed horses in Wu. He tasted what no king should ever be made to taste, and was laughed at and bowed. Then he was allowed home, and at home he slept on firewood, hung a gallbladder from the beam above his bed, and every morning, before anything else, licked its bitterness once. The victorious army wins first, and then seeks battle. No general ever read that sentence more deeply than this man who had lost everything. He was preparing to spend 10 years, 20 years, winning a war that had not yet begun. And in the court of Wu stood our old acquaintance. Wu Zixu looked at the surrendered king and saw, at one glance, what hung behind that gallbladder. He warned the new king once, twice, again and again. The new king would not hear it. The gravedigger's story still has one last sword to account for. Next time, the king who licked gall.